for everybody. Welcome back. And I think everybody has been in this group before in some capacity. So I just want to welcome everyone and also introduce the other folks supporting us tonight. I'm Kathleen Elwood, the Area Senior Director for the Lincoln and Franklin Cluster. And I'm Shanice.
Greetings, y'all. It's good to see your faces again. And I'm Shanice Clark, the Director of Community Engagement, and look forward to hearing your perspectives and recommendations.
And then we also have Alex. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Alex Rosh, data analyst, population geographer with Flow, and I can hopefully answer any questions you guys have on the data specifics that Jen just went through.
Great. So the whole purpose of tonight is really to just get as much input around these three questions that we were just faced with just a moment ago. So what I can do, I guess I can share my screen, and we are going to do what's called a Jamboard activity. I don't know how familiar everyone is with that, but I got to see, for fifth graders do it yesterday in a math class. So at Ainsworth. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my kids use them in their math class.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're a great way to do interactive work together. So what I'm going to do is post, oh, you're way ahead of me. Shanice is way ahead of me. Thank you. I will go ahead and share my screen and we will go to the Jamboard. If you follow the link, you will actually have an opportunity this time to actually, we have two ways to submit input. One is through, if you want to do it verbally, then I or Shanice can go ahead and write the notes down. And if you want to go ahead and use the Jamboard yourself and put down your thoughts, because sometimes people think faster than they speak, you're welcome to do so that way also. The way to use the Jamboard is, I think the easiest thing to use are the Post-it notes, which over here on the left, you'll see a little Post-it note symbol or sticky note. It's called sticky note. I guess it's not a name brand. You can even choose your color, and you basically just write your notes in it and then hit save, and it will move it on to the Jamboard. Sometimes we get a Jamboard parking lot, which means all the Post-it notes collect all in one spot. So you can also make it bigger or smaller and move it to a different spot on the Jamboard, if that makes sense. And again, we're also happy to write comments down.
Good, you'll do that. Sorry, sorry, I didn't know I was muted or unmuted.
Did I scare you already? I've already scared people off. This isn't good. All right, so let's go ahead with the first question. Everyone just saw the three options. So the first question is, how are stakeholders and communities affected by each of the supplemental options for Creston?
Hey, Kathleen, can I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
This is Sheila. Hi, it's good to see everybody again. When we all met back in December, I felt like we had a pretty thoughtful process to come to the decision that we did. Like, I feel like we talked a lot about racial equity. We talked a lot about desired sort of capacities and utilization. And I felt really comfortable with that decision that we came together with as a group. And I know that there has been a lot of Facebook comments and a lot of other kinds of influences on the board. But I guess one of the things I'm wondering is, as we go through this experience tonight, do we retain the option to simply bring back our same recommendation to the board and say, you know, we've heard this, you know, we fully empathize and understand the concerns of the Creston community, and we still think this is the right step forward?
I can say we are welcome to give any feedback we want, including that option. The focus on Creston today came about, as was stated earlier, because some parents from Creston have voiced some concerns, and the concerns they voiced were they felt that it impacted racial equity as far as their community and the students served in their community, based on some of the comments I heard at the board meeting. So we can recommend, basically, this is an opportunity for feedback on each of these three options, but as Danny said, we can be as creative as we want, and we can say we stand by the process that we did, and these are the reasons why. How do other folks feel about what Sheila has proposed?
I am in complete agreement with her. I feel like, I mean, I appreciate trying to look at adding Creston in different ways, but the numbers say it's not possible. And I feel like it's a slap in the face to all the time we've invested in this and all the thought we've invested in this, that we're being bullied by a couple loud parents and all the underserved students that Kellogg is going to serve. They'll just be at an overcrowded school and thrown to the side again. And that's students of color, that's students who haven't been cared for before. And this feels like an utter waste of time. And I'm about to be done.
I agree 100%. I mean, to me, walking through the math, especially, if you look at all the updated assumptions, and first of all, I'm a little annoyed that we didn't, I mean, the current enrollment numbers all point to, if anything, to me, it confirms our original thinking about being conservative about the projected enrollment at Kellogg, because even, I mean, I realize we revised down the capacity a little bit, but you know, Creston's actual enrollment's a bit up, Marysville is up quite a bit, and pretty much most of the schools were more. So if anything, I think this just confirms our original thinking about, you know, like Alex, like you said, that there's not going to be space for this to work. I mean, I think we should talk through the options for sure. And I think that I was surprised, one, because I mean, I was at the board meeting and I didn't hear any board members ask for this level of drastic change.
No, it was public comment before you spoke.
In fact, I heard several board members specifically ask us not to go down this road tinkering like this precisely because of the unintended consequences. So I was surprised in that regard. But also, I think if we're going to consider any modifications, it's pretty clear we need to combine some of these pretty aggressively to get back. Like, I don't think.
Well,
personally, I continue to think we can't open a Kellogg with 90+%.
Well, and also if we consider some of these options even at all, then that effectively says Harrison Park cannot feed to Franklin, and Franklin will be overcrowded no matter what. We will not be able to attack that problem in phase 2.
Well, that's the other piece. If we go with any of these, I think and this I think is what the board discussed. Like, I think we need to be explicit that if we make any of these modifications short term, that they are exactly that. This is short term. This is explicitly up for discussion again in phase 2. This is not the long term future path for Kellogg or how. Like, we need to be very, very clear if we go with any of these modifications that it is not.
But do you believe that even if we said it was short term, it would actually be short term?
That is my.
I have no faith.
Concern. That's my exact concern. Inertia is very powerful. And that's
also
on Tabor's strand too, right?
I also just want to point out that, you know, again, while I empathize, right? We all want what's best for our kids and for all of our kids. But Creston is not the only school that's being asked to stay K-8. And so for me, I feel like we're not achieving our goals as a coalition if we say, well, okay, we'll make this exception for this one community, but we're not talking about Harrison Park at all, which really hits me hard. And Andy, like, I know that we have not come to a complete decision around Bridger in totality either. And so that's why, again, I felt comfortable with the decision we reached in December, because I felt like even though it wasn't perfect, we all were kind of in agreement. And I'm really worried about letting this shift happen, because I feel like it opens up all these doors for people to just be a loud voice and really advocate for one school rather than what we need to do as an entire coalition.
Yeah. If anything,
I absolutely agree. I feel like, sorry, I feel like if they strong arm us right now, they're going to strong arm us continually down the road.
And I'm sorry, Lisa's had her hand up for quite a while, so I just want to honor her patience. Thank you.
Oh, I apologize. I couldn't see that.
Thank you. Hi. So I listened to the board meeting, and I have, again, I am a Vestal parent, so I'm not in your group. I have listened, I've supported, I have tried to understand. You guys know so much more than I, but I had an idea. Hear me out. It's not full. Because I don't know how to go about it. What about if we take, so middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. What about, in a sense, to throw Creston a bone, we just take their 8th graders and put them to Kellogg. But I don't know what is best to do for a middle school process. So to back up, for my backup, I grew up near an Army base. Kids were coming and going constantly. So the idea that a child needs to be based and needs to be in the same school with their same friends all their life makes no sense to me at all. I mean, from kindergarten through high school, kids were coming and going in the middle of the week. All of a sudden they were there on Tuesday, they were gone on Wednesday because their parents were transferred to Germany or Japan or wherever the heck. So that concept is a little strange to me, that a child needs to be somewhere the whole time. Anyway, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. But my thought is, what about, so is it better to put Creston and maybe another school, we just put their 8th graders into Kellogg, leave their 6th and 7th alone? That keeps the numbers down, but it throws Creston a bone. Or is it better to do the 6th graders? So the 6th graders get their entire middle school experience in a middle school. Or is it better to give the 8th graders, because the 8th graders need to mature and get that experience before they get to high school? I don't know. I'm dealing with a 1st grader. So you understand what I'm saying. And Alexandra, hi, I someday hope to meet you, because I want to hug you, because I do, because I like a lot what you say. I just think you sound like an amazing woman. And I'm sorry you sound so frustrated. Don't give up. If I'm still here, you have to be here too with me, okay? But I don't know. What do you guys think of that? Is it realistic? Is it something that the school could pull off? Is it, am I thinking outside, like Andy said, like you don't want to redo the whole thing, and Sheila said too, like, am I going too far?
I think it's definitely, we need to put it down as a potential option. And I know Shanice is keeping track of any ideas that are coming up in addition to the notes that we're going to put onto the Jam board. So I'm just going to get us back to that so we don't run out of time. So we definitely want to make sure we're honoring all the other things that people are saying. But I feel like if we don't have any specific feedback for the 3 that we've been presented with this evening, then we could also run into some issues with being able to justify our choices or our suggestions or options. So again, folks are welcome to enter directly on the Jam board. You just have to click on a little Post-it note or go ahead and say something out loud, and we can certainly get it down in writing. So let's look, these are not split up in 3 different options, are they? So, all right, so let's think about the first option. The first option, let me go back to the slides, the correct one. Whoops, I passed it. So the first option was to, the Spanish immersion program would remain at Mount Tabor Middle School and all of Creston would move to Kellogg. And this is what the statistics look like, or demographics look like, with option A. So Kellogg at 97.4%, Hosford at 98%, and Mount Tabor at 102.9%. So let's go ahead and put down any responses to that first.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I haven't had a chance to look over everything, but on that chart, it only shows the number of students, right? Mm-hmm. Is there another chart somewhere that shows the racial and other demographic shifts in that way for each supplemental option compared to the original recommendation?
I have some data available to me that was pulled by PPS staff within, kind of minutes of starting this meeting, like at 5 p.m. So I can, it's not really great for presentation purposes, but I can look at that, and it has been summed to the 3 options. So I can start pulling that up.
I think that's really important. I think what the group is bringing up, which is one of the things that I thought about right away as this was being presented. My very first question was why. I didn't hear a why. I kept listening for, the only thing I heard was parents presented concerns at the board, so we are now considering 3 new options. I didn't hear something about, Kathleen, you mentioned some comments about racial equity concerns on behalf of Creston parents. Can you be any more specific? I didn't listen to the board presentation.
Yeah, what I heard in specifically in the public comments, I was thinking there were two presenters who mentioned the demographics of Creston, and that, and again, I don't want to take anyone's words out of context, but what I gathered from it was what they were presenting was that that those students those BIPOC students deserve the same access to the same opportunities as the students from the other feeder schools. And again, anybody else who watched or was a part of the meeting, feel free to correct me because I didn't sit down and take notes or memorize it.
No, I watched it too, Kathleen, and I feel like that was kind of public comment. I feel like, I mean, I hate to play the numbers games, but the BIPOC students from the Creston community are a very small percentage of what will be feeding to Kellogg if you look at all the feeder schools. And it's for 1 year. It's not like that's my whole thing is the Creston community, while I feel for them and I understand, it's 1 year that we're asking PPS to support their middle schoolers in a K-8, where if their middle schoolers go to a designated middle school, they will most likely go to an overcrowded middle school, and then their K-5s will still be left underfunded like Arleta and Marysville and Lent. So, I mean, it's kind of a bad choice either way, but keeping a whole school community for 1 year, to me, seems like it's supporting students more.
Yeah, those are all very valid arguments.
I think, I wanted to echo Jennifer's comment about not having real information of why. Basically, this coalition is a giant ship that we just steered midstream to turn around and go back and pick up somebody real quick, right? We pushed so many things from phase 1 into phase 2 that going back to revisit this piece of phase 1, the time crunch on phase 2 gets, even tighter, especially if we start a precedent of, we will reopen this if you complain loud enough.
Build on that, Josh. I mean, this effectively, because I think we would have to, if you look at these utilization numbers, if we went with any of these, I don't think anybody would view this as a good long-term solution. We're essentially adding yet another thing to the list for phase 2, right? Because we're gonna have to come back to this Creston's long-term feeder pattern. Like we're going to have to anyway, but it's gonna be in the context of, we're probably gonna have to unfeed a school. You know what I mean? That we
right.
Going with, and
like we need to include them for the sake of making sure that they're included, but that means that they'll be changing twice.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like two of these, well, 1.5 of these, we specifically considered at the last meeting and did not get consensus on delaying the movement of Mount Tabor Middle School. We specifically voted against that. The just adding Creston, I know the wrinkle here is that we're going to not have the transfers, but it doesn't do enough to reduce enrollment. Specifically rejected that pretty overwhelmingly because of concerns that we're seeing in this data, which is that the utilization rate is too high. So I think that if we're gonna offer suggestions on this, if just putting forth our original proposal with a statement about why isn't viable, it's what combination of these can we put together? Maybe Alex, if you have some of the underlying data on some of the assumptions that can get us closer to 80–85%, because I think you'd have to combine, like, don't move Mount Tabor Middle School, also don't do the transfers, also don't do Bridger, frankly, maybe send all of Bridger to Harrison Park right from the start. I mean, I don't know, but you'd have to do a lot though, based on these numbers to get to what we'd feel like would be a good utilization rate, I think.
Indeed, Alex, I think we would have to combine things if we were to strive for utilization rates that low. Yeah.
And Alex,
like that has been a consistent theme of the coalition. Like one of the few things that has united the coalition, I think, has been a desire not to overcrowd Kellogg right from the start. So to me, that would be a priority. And then if we can't do it, then I think, I mean, again, like I feel like the spirit of our recommendation was, we understand this has some, we don't love how every aspect of how this ended up, but we looked at tons of other alternatives and they just, the math is the math, right? So anyway. But maybe we can play around with the numbers if we have time to see what we can combine.
Let's go ahead and finish responding to the scenarios, and then let's go back so we can craft something new. So let's just do that quickly. And Carissa, do you want to go ahead while I reshare?
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious. Can somebody just speak to the numbers at Creston and their middle grades, how it compares to the other K-8 schools that are being converted next year? I mean, is Creston, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but are they a particularly small group of kids at Creston in the middle grades, or is it pretty comparable?
I can look into a comparison of the other schools, but looking at the data right now for Creston, and remember what Jed and Judy mentioned, this is looking at 2020 school year 5th through 7th graders, presuming the majority of them will grade up into middle school at Creston. It's 134.
We've actually,
grades.
In the PowerPoint for tonight, we actually have those numbers, I believe. And Megan sent that just before the meeting started. So it looks like, I don't know, I don't see the Creston numbers there, but I see numbers from Arleta and Bridger, Lent, Marysville, all of other schools.
Right. And
the report, maybe
page 9.
Kathleen, I do have those numbers for the options too, but if we wanted to start with just looking at the, yeah, there as well.
Yeah, are these are they, is that correct?
Go down a little bit more to option A, and it lists Creston at 134.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess, you know, one thing that, because when we started this discussion tonight, I just had it in my head that we were only talking about making this decision for the next year, and then, you know, that it would have to change, and that, you know, most likely Creston would not be continuing in the Kellogg feeder pattern, whatever its boundary is going to become. But I mean, I do worry about Creston's middle school program because, you know, we're coming off of a pandemic. So, you know, kids have had a really unusual situation for what will, you know, amount to probably a full school year plus, you know, part of another one. And then, you know, they have a small program that may get smaller, and what really is going to be the experience of those kids. So I understand why people at Creston are upset. And I guess it comes down to, yeah, I don't like overcrowded schools either, but I also don't want to just leave the Creston kids in an unfortunate situation either. So I don't know, that's where I struggle with it.
Well, let's go ahead back to the Jamboard so we can respond to the prompts that we've been asked to, and then we can look at maybe some numbers crunching. This is only one page of the Jamboard. If you hit the arrow up at the top where it says next frame, there is a second page and then a third page, other suggestions. So let's go ahead and do the second page. How are stakeholders in support or opposition to the options? We've already heard many voices. So feel free to go ahead and put some of your comments up here so that it's documented somewhere other than in our discussion.
Lisa, are you able to access the Jamboard, or do you want me to write on the third one for you about the options of moving just 8th graders or just 6th graders?
I am seriously technologically
okay. I'll get it for you.
Issues.
Okay.
If somebody else can synopsis.
I can also add that in too. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And Kathleen, for stakeholders in slide 2, is that referring to us, to parent communities? Like, what does stakeholders mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not sure if they mean us, you know, ourselves as the stakeholders. Or how are you in support or opposition to the options? I don't know if we can speak for others, other beyond the testimony that those of us who saw the board meeting heard. It's interesting, yeah.
Don't we have a Creston parent in our group?
No, she's in the other group. I just heard from someone she's in a different group because I believe we only have one Creston parent and the principal.
Yeah, the principal is not here this evening.
Okay, okay. The hard part is with this speaking outside of ourselves. Unfortunately, it speaks to the loud voices again because we're only hearing the people from Creston who disagree with this plan. We're not hearing people who are okay with this plan. And so I don't, you know, that's again leading to the loud voices thing where it's really hard to change things just because of the loud voices when you don't really know if that's a whole community feeling or if they're looking at the whole picture. I mean, I know we all get wrapped up as humans and hit a wall, you know, in the front that we can't look past anything.
Well, we did have 2 Creston parents at one point, and there was one that was in our group, and I don't know if you guys remember when she actually did speak. So our Arleta parent is in the group with the other Creston parent, and so I've gotten information from her, and they seem to have very differing opinions just between the 2 of them, because the Creston parent that we had in our group had relayed, and if, you know, if I'm incorrect, please correct me, but my recollection was that she said that there were some people that were kind of ambivalent about it. There were some people that felt strongly one way, and there were some people that felt strongly another way. And my recollection was that she kind of presented that as almost equal groups from her personal experience.
Yeah, I believe that was the principal that was in our group, Sandra,
Yeah,
who said that. I know I've
Okay.
also been in email contact with the Creston PTA president because I'm the outgoing family club president at Marysville. It's our parent group. And I've had a really hard time with the emails we've had back and forth just because of how staunchly she has her feelings on this and how diverse her school is as well. So they've been hard conversations, I can say, definitely.
My question on this slide, which I don't think we can answer, but would be the question for the Creston community, is I think it's pretty clear that any scenario that adds all or most of Creston to Kellogg next year is going to result in a Kellogg that is overcrowded by almost any standard. And so the question is, I know that their preference would be add Creston and don't have an overcrowded school, right? But if the options are waiting a year for their middle school assignments and, you know, hopefully we'll be able to do that through phase 2 in a way where schools are not overcrowded, or immediately going to Kellogg that's overcrowded in its first year, like what's the preference? And then of course, it's not just up to Creston, right? And Alexander, you made a great point, which is that we got to think about all the other students at Creston, because great, we've added Creston to Kellogg, but that just means that all the students at Kellogg are going to have a subpar experience because the school's overcrowded in its first year, right? And that's, I don't think that's arguably doing harm to an even greater number of students than we are potentially harming in some way with our original proposal. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
So let's go ahead. Feel free to add to that, because again, you can move to whatever page I'm showing is not the only page you can access. So you can move to whichever page you like. Let's go ahead to suggestions, which is page 3 on the Jamboard. And I see some folks have already been putting down some of the suggestions they have. What I heard was that folks are interested in, well, and suggestions, we can also put down that the suggestion is to stick with what the guiding coalition originally proposed, you know, for these reasons. That would be a legitimate thing to put here also, to make sure your voices are represented. One of the things we started to discuss was breaking things apart and moving things together. So if I end up putting up, or Alex ends up putting up some demographics or things like that, I just want to make sure people know they can still access the Jamboard and put thoughts and ideas on there. Were there any thoughts around that, or any specifics, as a few of you were mentioning that as a potential option to help those numbers?
Alex, do you have a spreadsheet that shows sort of the enrollment assumptions for each of the categories that are kind of in that?
Yeah, I can share it if you guys want me to take over, Kathleen.
Yeah, let me stop. There we go. It's all yours.
All right.
Everybody knows how to use a Jamboard now. Very good. Everyone's did a great job. These 5th graders are incredible because they were doing division, like writing it. I was impressed.
All right. This is kind of a combination of what was in the presentation, but just all in one spot, so we can kind of look at it. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is kind of the first part of the recommendation, and we have the same line items with the 2020 enrollment for grades 5 through 7. And what I tried to do for simplicity and comparison's sake is highlight things that are changing. So for instance, in option A, it's that the Atkinson Mount Tabor DLI strand would be replaced by Creston neighborhood. So the difference there is going from 79 kids feeding into Kellogg for instead 134. So that's where we get that increase up to 97.4%. And then you have option B, and this is where the students that don't attend their neighborhood school would essentially be sent back to their neighborhood school and could not attend Kellogg. So the cells that are highlighted in green are showing that, where Arleta, 168 live in that attendance area and would become feeding into Kellogg. In option B, that drops down to 136. And this is a column just kind of showing the difference of those. So essentially, when you sum it, you get 119 kids that would, well, let me think about that for a second. I maybe mixed this just slightly, but just know that, Arleta decreases, Lent decreases, Marysville decreases. We have to consider special education in the Arleta-Creston area, and then in place of that, 100 kids come in from Creston. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me. My question is, if we do decide that being a caveat to what we're saying, I just don't know, and I'm trying to weigh this in my head, is that we have so many from the Spanish DLI that come from out of neighborhood. So it almost feels like all those parents who have said, why would you push my kids out of a middle school to allow for this language school? Like, because we're going to be doing boundary changes in phase 2. I just feel like it's kind of cementing that language is more important than the neighborhood programs. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm saying it right, but I mean, I heard that in the survey comments and stuff, and in my own school meetings where it's like, why are we speaking so much about the language programs and not talking as much about the neighborhood programs?
Can I ask a clarifying question? I'm just wondering, so the difference between this 168 for Arleta, for instance, and the 136. So we're keeping the neighborhood kids and we're keeping the special ed kids. So who are these other kids that we're not keeping? Like, I'm just wondering what that is exactly.
Right. Maybe I'll just wait a second if the echo goes away. There we go. Yeah. So these are students that attend Arleta but don't live in the boundary.
So like the kids that are there on passes.
Yeah.
That's so funny because my kids are going to be there on passes, but we were told from the get-go, don't expect to go to Kellogg, and we're not. We're going to go to our neighborhood school, but it was just more for continuity. So I didn't even know that was ever an option.
I think my assumption is it's part of the grandfather system that you get to continue. Especially if there's like siblings involved. I could be wrong on that, but that's kind of what I'm saying. You lived in the neighborhood at one time and moved out, but your kids could still move with their classmates.
Yeah, it was just funny because that's not what I was told, but it's also not my expectation. And I personally don't dislike the idea of those kids needing to go to their neighborhood school after they finish out whatever time that they've done at the school that they're at a pass on.
Sure, I just wonder about the sibling relationship. Like, I agree with you, Sandra. The sibling and how it works.
It'd be helpful to see how many had siblings that were already, that are split across levels or something. I mean, so just back of the envelope math I've been doing while we've been talking, it seems like if you, and Alex, you'll have to check me on this, but it seems like if we did option C, but also took out all of the non-neighborhood students, or at least all of the non-neighborhood students who aren't special education, because I want to come back to the special education piece. I have some concerns about, and I know that's been something, but it seems like that gets you to around 83%, which is in the ballpark. So in other words, if we did the split, by the way, I don't understand why we're doing a north-south split here when it's kind of an east-west division. That was very weird to me. but assuming you split it some way and you get about 70.
Thanks, Andy.
plus 70 minus, I guess it would be about 100 if you include the special ed. So that gets you, I think, to something that's in the low mid 80s. So if we had to pick an option, maybe that's a way to do it.
And I think too, can't the transfer office make a case-by-case decision for kids that have siblings at the school? I don't think that any of us desire to force families to yank siblings apart and have to go through the burden of going to one school and another school and back and forth and things like that. Which is why, like, even at our focus options, you have a higher percentage of getting a sibling into the focus school. It's not guaranteed, but go ahead.
Oh, I say, I like that idea of like kind of like holding a little bit of grace there too, because I think we don't know like the experience of all the students who are currently in that school but maybe don't live in that area. There could be a lot of reasons behind that, and especially coming off the pandemic, I just want to be really thoughtful for, there's like, as much as we can give kids continuity, I think that's better. However, I am open to, proceeding with that if that's what we need to do.
Is there also,
go ahead. Sorry.
Early on in the phase 1 process, I kind of brought up budget questions because, moving kids from one place to another, as much as we want to do that, that's one thing. The other side of it is throwing more money at the problem, right? Or being able to shift money in different places. Is there a fund that we could pass to Creston for like updated technology or, to make their school better rather than have them feel left out of getting into the better school? We make their existing school better and it helps them get through another year. Like, is there some sort of laptops or devices or something the school board could do and avoid all of this big shift just to shift again?
Well, and see, that's what I was thinking too, because I thought that was like the offer that we were sending to with our proposal was that the district, and I don't like to separate us out, but that the district was going to help Creston by doing exactly what you're saying. And so what I'm having a hard time with is struggling with trying to figure out if one board member is against this, don't we have more than just one board member? And then if we give our proposal, the original proposal back to the board, exactly as we said, but we've talked through this, is there I don't know how this works. This is brand new to me, but let's say we put our proposal back to the board as is, say we've talked about it, we've tried to figure new ways to look at it. Is there a certain amount of board members that have to agree that say, we support this, but that, because I watched it too, that one board member for sure is not going to support it, but do they have to all agree? And does our proposal have to capture all of the board members, or do they have to capture a portion of the board members? Because I know I listened to Scott and I listened to, I don't remember her name, but they were like for us.
Yeah.
There's one board member that wasn't, and she wasn't clear about why, really, honestly. There's a letter, there's information that I know that is out there that we can see, but what we presented, what the coalition presented to the board felt really good. It felt solid, and it felt like we would be able to offer, we'd be able to show that the district is here to help. The district is here to support. The district we could do this. And now we're back at not working together. Upsets me. I want us to work together.
I think Director Bailey jumped into our group.
He's actually here, and he's.
Sorry, Scott.
I don't want to put you on the spot, Scott.
Sorry.
No, that's why I'm paid the big bucks, right? Sorry, another same old bad old joke. I just want to say a couple of things. And I'm just going to speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure other board members feel the same, many of the same things that I'm feeling. One is, yes, I definitely wanted us to support the framework that you brought forward. Two, I'm human. I Zoomed with a bunch of Creston parents. So my discussions with staff were more like, is there any capacity for for doing this, even on a temporary basis. But that was then. And the new numbers we see tonight, to me, are like, wow. I'll just stop there, because it really changes. It really changes things. You know, a week ago, it seemed like there was some wiggle room about a bunch of things, and still being true to the capacity concerns. It's this, seeing these numbers, it's different. And I almost want to say is, wow, do we want to do some things even apart from Creston to make sure we've got a good capacity number at Kellogg next year? I'm almost doing a 180 in terms of, can we be true to the framework and still figure out a way to get Creston kids into a middle school somewhere? So I would say, and I also want to say, don't blame the Creston parents. They're advocating for their kids. They've got a crappy 6 through 8 experience going. And I really don't think we can throw a bunch of money in there and make it all that much better. So I just want to say that we can throw a Band-Aid, but it's not the same. So don't blame them. If you want to blame board members, that's where it would go.
But the problem that I have with this is that I don't want to be blaming anybody. We're working towards a solution, and
right.
My challenge at the moment is the fact that we've been doing this since September, and we're just having these conversations about Creston being upset about this. And I'm going to say Harrison Park's coming up next, and we're already talking about it. So there's a frustration a little bit from my perspective, because I see what's coming to Harrison Park, and I'm nervous. I'm nervous about what the process, how we're going to effectively take care of our kids, of Harrison Park kids. And so
you're not wrong.
I don't want to blame anybody or say, but I want to figure out a way. This is a negotiation, and it feels like a little bit from my perspective, because I haven't talked to any of the Creston families, feels like we're being pushed into something at the very last minute when we've been talking about this since September. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah, another thing,
that's why I've been just really trying to consistently say, and that was the message I put out, is that we have to be true to the framework you put forward. And it was not I didn't approach it as go find a way to do this. It was, is there a way to do this? And there, I was ready for a no answer, but with these new numbers, it just moves me in the opposite direction.
I just want to say that the more we can stick with that framework, the more we can actually be accountable to all of the parents in the entire area. And so I just that's part of the reason why I'm so because we have good reasoning for why we made the presentation and, the decisions we did. And the other thing too, is that we're going to be talking about all of our schools in this next phase. And it's not saying I don't empathize with any folks who are not getting what they feel is best for their students over these next 6 months to a year. But the more we sort of fray that framework, the harder it's going to be for us to actually do our work moving forward.
Yeah, no, I'm.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started right away. Since time is ticking, we have another Jamboard activity. So we're going to go ahead and post that into the chat bar. Oh, he turned off the ability to do that. Oh no. Okay. Well, I will put up the Jamboard, and Shanice and I will go ahead and share our screen.
Shanice shared it, I think.
Shanice?
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, they must have changed the permissions. Thank you. So the first one, again, we can put on comments for you. You can also put in comments as we reflect on phase one, what areas of improvement or further growth are we suggesting? So this is just about process this time.
I mean, I hate to be the downer on this one, but since nobody's really speaking to it, I really feel like we have, as a group, such limited time together. And I feel like a lot of the time is wasted. I feel like we go over the same things in depth every single meeting when we've already had a whole meeting to talk about it, specifically stating our truths and things like that. I think we all understand that. I also think tonight kind of does that again. It's like we've worked so hard to come to a framework, and yet then you're presenting us with new things at the last minute and asking us to scrap all the work. Like, I just don't feel valued, and I don't feel like this is a valuable use of my time, especially since my kids and my family need me so much right now. The process has been really cumbersome.
Would anyone like to add to that?
I think also just making it clear what it is that we're being asked to consider. And, you know, in the case of tonight, I think, you know, one big question that I don't really feel like we answered was this expected that this was a decision for Creston just for next year? And, you know, so I just think that those are kind of really basic, you know, framework that you need to explain to people to be able to really have a good conversation and a good outcome. So.
Thank you to both of you for sharing, Alexandra and Carissa. Are there any other thoughts about this specifically?
Well, I'd just like to add, and thank you, Carissa and Alexandra, for sharing. I want to start off by saying, like, I also don't want to be the downer and feel uncomfortable, you know, sharing critical feedback about the process. But I spent a lot of time giving my feedback on the survey that was sent out. So now we're spending 25 minutes on this conversation, and I'm wondering how it's different. You know, I do think discussion is important, and it's a different mode of sharing feedback where we might then have new ideas for improvement based on, you know, what other people say. But it feels a little strange to be talking about this. I don't know. I guess I just wonder what the relation is between the written feedback that we gave. How is that going to be shared? That was also about the process, if that makes sense. So well, I think time, how we use our time is just really, really essential.
Well, and Jennifer, I appreciate you said that, because on my written feedback form, I said, we never review the written feedback. Like, it feels like we're asked to submit it, it's never talked about again, and we just move on. So I don't know. I guess I'm a results person, and I'm a data person, and I'm an auditor in my professional job. So this just doesn't seem like a productive forum. You know, it's very backlogged.
I just want to add to that as well. In terms of areas of improvement, like Kathleen, I've really appreciated your facilitation tonight and in other sessions as well. And I also think that sometimes when you have a group, even the size of the group we are tonight, I noticed that we have some group members who haven't really shared that much or have only shared once or twice. And so I'm wondering if there can be some more intention about, you know, we have people who are slower and longer, you know, processors versus shorter processors. We have people who want to have a dialogue versus others. So again, I appreciate there's been kind of new things like the Jamboard coming in to share those ideas, but I also sometimes want a little bit more sort of intentional facilitation to make sure that we're hearing from, you know, everybody in our groups too.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, I will just say, for those of us who are technologically challenged, I will own it, and I like my life that way. But like the Jamboard, to me, I'm just like, it's one more thing that I had to learn, and it jammed in with trying to school at home. I'm like, it's one of those things I've lost. I can't even, for me, I can't even see what's being typed on those little sticky notes. Like I don't know. So it's kind of maybe if you're trying to make sure you're inclusive of people who are second language, or they use a second language, maybe that's something we need to consider. I know your 5th grader uses it. My 1st grader does not. So
yeah, thank you. Let's go ahead to the next question, which is, and feel free, of course, you can access the Jamboard, or we can write down a comment. We are writing down comments for people also. From your experience this fall during phase 1, what is important to continue in phase 2 as we move forward?
I added this comment that's already here about, I agree with pretty much everything that folks said about improvement areas. If I'm trying to look on the bright side about, especially the last month or so of the process, I do think it helped us a lot to, I mean, there were pluses and minuses, as people have made very clear, but I think it helped us a lot to have a smaller thing to consider, right? So we were like, we're just going to consider Kellogg's feeder path. Now, obviously that's tough because everything's interconnected here, as we've talked about, but I do think that helped us narrow our thinking, narrow our options, make a little bit more efficient use of time than when we were all over the place, kind of reacting to the springboard proposal back in September that did a million things at once. Like there was no way we were going to make headway there. And I feel like in phase 2, which is like this times 100 or something, like we're gonna have to take that same approach. Like the order is going to be important, but we're gonna have to do something like, let's start with Harrison Park's feeder pattern, then we got to consider the Clark building, then we got to consider maybe Franklin feeder. I don't know what it is, but I think that each one of those things by itself is going to be quite a complicated discussion. And if we get the order right, I think we could tackle it in a way that would minimize the ripple effects or like go in the right order. But I think we put a lot of thought into the order, because what I don't think is going to work is if we do another, hey, here's the springboard, let's go to work. Like I think we learned that that's not going to
work. I was going to say, to add to that, I think that, the open-ended approach for the first 6 meetings or whatever we had was not going to, like, those were all 100% wasted time by the end of it. I know that for myself, I was probably disillusioned to what the power of the coalition could pull off. But it was sold as this like, hey, let's shake up schools. Let's address, equality. In my mind, we're moving kids across Portland. We're figuring stuff out. We're getting everybody where they need to be. And then it was like, wait, no, it's this dot right here. But let's make sure we're not stepping on anybody inadvertently. And that's a totally different scope. And I think if we're honest about scope and direct about it in the beginning, we'll have a much more efficient phase 2, because you can kind of squash the big dreams and go for what makes sense in the short term.
And just to add one more thing to that, I think a big part of that is also going to be, and this is kind of a separate point, from the start, being really clear on what's really the coalition's job to decide versus what it's the district's job to decide. And I'm thinking about the weeks we spent on, for example, dual language immersion configuration and stuff like that. And, in the end, we moved away from that even being a focus of phase 1. But I mean, I'd argue that's something that it's the academics experts in PPS's job to figure that one out. And we implement what they decide, right? I think there's a few other things where like we've talked about the use of the Clark building and potential implications for creative science. I actually don't think it's the coalition's job to figure out potential alternate locations for creative science. I think that if we're going to consider that as an option, we should have at the start of phase 2, hey, here's some, if you want to consider that, here's what we've come up with as the potential locations that DSS could go to, or a clear answer that, no, it really can't move, in which case we may like that, we may not, but that narrows what we're going to be talking about, right? So we listed that in the recommendation, but I think answers from the district on some key points, like enrollment targets for schools, all that kind of stuff is going to be really important.
I think to that point too, it's also like with the DLI, here's where co-balanced schools can fit. Here's where they can't fit. Like if that's their goal, it took us over 2 months for me to get a straight answer about access when that was in our original documents that we had to find a home for access that we got from Flo, you know, and I actually ended up finding it out from another parent, not even a PPS staff member. So and like in tonight's information we got right before the meeting, it's saying phase 2 is lasting through the fall. And like, that's new information now too to us. I mean, that's a big commitment. So the communication needs to be very clear on what we're doing.
So we do have a student representative here, and he hasn't had an opportunity to speak. Parker, did you have anything you just wanted to add regarding the process or anything we've discussed tonight? And if not, no worries. I just don't want to put you on the spot.
Sure. Well, thank you, Kathleen. I don't have anything that hasn't already been addressed. I know student input and that has been a continuous discussion, and the folks at the district are working on that, which I'm happy about. I'm happy that that's in consideration. I don't have much to add. I'm doing a lot of observing tonight, but thanks for the opportunity, Kathleen.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, following Lisa's great advice earlier. And is there anyone else who hasn't had a chance to give any input who would like to jump in? We have a lot of administrators in our group also, so we definitely want to make sure we're honoring each person's voice.
I just think, you know, it's really important to think ahead, that we can't make decisions always for right now. We have to really look at trajectories and keeping that in mind. And it's hard because I feel like parents especially, it's about your student, and I get that. I have my own kids and I you know, in that situation, but also understanding that you know, we can't be short-sighted because this will have lasting impact.
Great, thank you. And I've just popped up the last Jamboard, which is what are our overall hopes for the phase 2 process. Again, please feel free to continue adding or speaking to any of the previous slides. But again, this has been a learning process for PPS staff also. So we're continuing to learn, and having concrete suggestions here regarding the phase 2 process here, as well as in your exit survey, would be very helpful as that input is reviewed by the team.
Can I just ask it? I know I saw something somewhere, but I just wanted to double check if it actually is going to happen, that we're only going to meet every other week in phase 2.
That is what I've personally heard. I'm not sure if Shanice or anyone else knows for sure, but I had heard that it was an every other week meeting, so that there were times to process things in between and get all the data together that everyone requests in between meetings.
Yeah, that would be a hope of mine for phase 2.
Kathleen, can you offer any advice, or Shanice, or not advice, but any kind of feedback or ideas around what recruitment for additional coalition members might look like, or what some of the goals the district has related to that?
Yeah, I'm not on the actual planning committee per se, so I don't know if specific strategies have been addressed, but I do know that there is hope. I mean, I have found personally, you know, as a principal particularly, that the best way is through word of mouth and through relationship. So I think that's the best way to recruit people. Putting out emails or flyers the old-fashioned way only recruits a small percentage of people, and doesn't really necessarily allow for that representation of voices that we really need to have at the table for this process.
I'll just quickly comment. I know we have a couple minutes left, but there is a design, as time goes so quickly. We're designing a recruitment plan, and I know there's a number of schools that want to be included in the process, and I'm hearing some good ideas about what chunks we take off at once. So that may or may not have an impact But I think there's also a direction to both add additional folks in this space and kind of operate in a way where we can have some formal partnerships with communities and groups and kind of operate in a way where folks don't have to commit maybe to the coalition. So trying to do a both and approach.
Well, thanks for offering that.
Open to suggestions at all times. I've also found it helpful in the past to wrap in some of our community partners where we might have family members or community members who don't feel comfortable speaking in a big forum. Many of our community partners are used to being advocates for families in bigger crowds, and sometimes can do a good job representing.
Yeah, that was an approach that I hoped was going to be taken. So it's exciting to hear you mention that.
I would say kind of going back and reviewing the consensus process and how we're doing voting in these meetings, and really, you know, describing the results of votes accurately to reflect whether something is an actual consensus or simply a majority vote. And, you know, I think part of the reason we had our first part of this meeting addressing Creston's issues is because they were the ones that didn't get their issues addressed. And so, you know, I just think we need to be more thoughtful about how we're going about the consensus approach.
And our room is about to close. Thank you, Krista. Our room is about to close. I just want to thank everybody for your transparency and your honesty. You can feel free to continue adding to these resources.